Scatter plots and line plots are basic plots used for showing relationships between quantitative variables. For example, here is some sample data. Here is a scatter plot of that data created using the listplot function, and here is a line plot of that data created using the listLinePlot function. In the scatter plot, each element in the data is plotted as a point, and in the line plot, the points are connected by straight lines. In the listLinePlot function, it is also possible using the plot markers option to get a plot that shows both the dots and the lines, which can be useful for emphasizing individual points in the data. In realistic examples, it's almost always important to add labels. For the listplot and listLinePlot functions, labels can be added using options, and there are lots of ways to do that. For example, this shows a line plot with various labels added. In this input, the frame true option puts a frame around the plot. The frame label option adds the labels for the horizontal and vertical axes. The plot label option puts a label above the plot. The plot markers option specifies here that points should be shown as filled diamond shapes, and the plot legends option adds a legend on the right side of the plot. The importance of labels, and especially something like a legend, becomes even more apparent when there's more than one data set. For example, these inputs introduce 4 additional lists of numbers. These lists give population data for several different countries. And here is a line plot of all 5 of these lists of numbers using lines with different colors and a legend to identify each line based on color. Here's another example showing the same data but with the lines labeled using labels called callout labels rather than a legend. It is also possible to plot this sort of data using a scatter plot rather than using a line plot. For example, here is that same data shown as a scatter plot. For this data, however, the line plot is probably a better choice since the lines make it visually easier to follow each of the separate data sets across the plot. Without the lines, it's more difficult to track each data set through places where the rows of plot markers cross or overlap. As already noted, line plots and scatter plots are normally only used for showing relationships between quantitative variables. A data set like this, for example, which gives population data for a set of 5 countries, would more reasonably be displayed using an entirely different type of chart, such as a bar chart. In this data, the country is a categorical variable, and although countries could of course be ordered alphabetically or in some other way, the name of a country is essentially just a label. The same data could in principle be shown in a line plot like this, but a bar chart is probably a better choice since the conventional interpretation of a line plot is that the horizontal and vertical axes both represent a progression through values of some ordered quantity like a number or time or population, and so simply labeling one of the axes with values of a categorical variable could be misleading since it suggests an ordering that does not apply in this situation. Finally, as an example where a scatter plot might be more useful than a line plot, here is some data containing a list of outdoor temperature measurements at numbered days through the year for 10 consecutive years in a particular location. So this data is a list of 10 lists with one sublist for each of 10 years. Here is a plot of the first element in this data. This shows temperatures through the first year in the data. Here's a plot of temperatures for the first 2 years in the data. Here's a plot of temperatures for the first 3 years in the data, and eventually adding more and more lines to the plot creates such a jumble of lines that it could be difficult to see any trends or differences in temperatures from one year to the next. In deciding how to deal with that problem, it is important to consider the purpose of the plot, or basically consider what is the plot trying to show. If the purpose is to show the range of temperatures that might be expected on any particular day through the year, that purpose can be achieved using a scatter plot. For that purpose, the year that each temperature was measured isn't really important. The scatter plot shows the desired trends and ranges of temperatures through the year without the distracting jumble of lines.